Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Alistair and I'm a lecturer at Link University. I teach into pasture science, and 21 years ago I sat in Dick Lucas's pasture agronomy class, and he sold the story about legumes and about Caucasian clover. So the year after that I did a BXI honours dissertation in Caucasian clover, and then he sold the story to me again, and then I started a PhD in Caucasian clover. And now I examine his course, so he's been quite influential. And this piece of work is some stuff that actually didn't get into my thesis, and I've always promised my students, because I give it as an example in my classes, that I should get it published one day. So today's the day that that's happened. But we're looking at mixtures, and we're looking at the benefit that certain species contribute to those pasture mixtures. So when you design a seed mix, or you grow a mix of ryegrass and white clover, or lucerne and cocksfoot, the expectation is that you want the best performance of each of those species that you planted. And you also want something else, a little bit of extra, by growing those two species together. So the thinking is that if we grow certain species together, we get a performance benefit. And the performance benefit might be an increase in annual yield, it might be a more stable seasonal pattern of pasture growth, increase in feed quality, nitrogen mitigation, all those sorts of things. Okay? And then the other expectation is, well, what if we add another species? And what if we add another species? So the multi-species mixture sort of story. All of the performance of those species is going to be, of course, weighted by the contribution of those species in the mix, of the proportions of the species. So if you have bugger all of white clover, you're going to get bugger all result and contribution of the white clover in the mix. So that's the basis. So I've got a series of questions. The questions mainly around the multi-species mixture benefits or perceived benefits. If we grow a 5-species mix, do we actually get a yield performance compared to a simpler mix, say ryegrass, white clover, and there's been several pieces of work to do that. And also to try and disentangle the contribution of the species identity, so the actual the yield of the individual species to the overall yield of the mixture. And to disentangle that, if you like, that species identity effect with this interaction effect. So the interaction effects are really what is resulting in that increase in performance of the mixture compared to those species growing by themselves. And whether those benefits from the species identity and their interactions are consistent across a range of management conditions or environmental conditions. And do they persist over time? Because we don't want to be renewing our pastures all the time. So to answer those questions, or to test those questions, we set up a mixture experiment. The diagram on the right is a triangle, so in the corners of those triangles, they represent the monocultures. And in this experiment, we had the 3 species, Caucasian clover, white clover, and perennial ryegrass, and 1 cultivar of each. We also had the 3 possible 2-species combinations, and other points on the sides of that triangle, a 50-50 mix of each, and another mixture right in the middle of the diagram represents an even 3-species mixture. So we've got monocultures of Caucasian, white, clover and ryegrass, 3 2-species mixture combinations, and a 3-species mix, repeated over 2 levels of soil moisture, so irrigated and dryland, and we planted those down back in November 1999 on good Wakanui deep silt loam soil, so it's a high fertility site right beside the Link University campus, and good soil moisture holding capacity. Grazed by sheep, and the beauty of this study is that after I finished my PhD, our techs were able to carry that experiment on for another 2 or 3 years, so we've got a 5-year data set. We let those pastures establish in 1999, 2000. We had some issues with Caucasian clover establishment, wire weeds, so we let them sort themselves out, and we started doing the yield measurements in year 2, which is the 2000-2001 year. Okay, so here's Caucasian clover if you haven't seen it. Feed quality is about just the same as white clover. It spreads underground with rhizomes. It has a deep taproot, lasts longer than white clover's taproot, red clover's taproot. So it's got those characteristics that should be good for persistence of the legume species. Yields, so we'll look at dryland first. Remember, we've got 5 years starting in 2000, 2001. And dryland conditions, The first three columns there represent the monoculture yield. So the blue represents Caucasian clover, the light blue, the weeds. So it's slow to establish, we've got a weed ingress. The main weeds were annual collar, so that's small annual grass. White clover's doing well in the first year, after the sowing year, ryegrass as well. And now we've got our mixtures, so growing Caucasian clover with white clover, no additional benefits. So I've indicated what we call over-yielding, and that's when the yield of the mixture is better than the average yield of the monocultures. Okay, so that extra benefit, if you like. So if you grow two clover species together, no additional yield benefit. If you grow Caucasian clover and ryegrass together, in that first year, no additional yield benefit because Caucasian's a bit slow to the party, and white clover's cranking on, so those mixtures with white clover are doing quite nicely. The next year, similar thing. So now Caucasian clover is saying, okay, we're waking up, we're ready to rock and roll here. So it's starting to show, and then the mixtures as well is starting to contribute. And all of those mixtures that contain the grass and the clover are yielding better than what we'd expect from the monocultures. Likewise in year 3, we're getting that over yielding. So we're getting those yield benefits from growing a legume and a non-legume together. And also you can note too that no additional increase of adding 3 species compared to the best performing 2 species mixtures. Okay? And that result continues. So we're getting consistency over time, over those 5 years, despite some very big changes in botanical composition. And one of the big changes too, of course, is the weed ingress. And most of those weeds, as I said, were the annual collars and the grass weeds coming into the mix, which we usually expect. So that's the dryland. Irrigated conditions, put water on, you get a yield increase. That yield increase wasn't very much, probably about 3 to 6 tonnes a hectare on average on this good soil. But we're still getting over yielding. Caucasian clover is still slow to the party, but by the second year it's contributing quite nicely. And we're getting that consistent over yielding by growing the legume and the non-legume together, and no additional increase by growing the 3 species together compared to the best performing 2 species mixtures. So that's one way to analyse it. Another way to analyse it, to separate those species effects and the interaction effects, is to fit a series of regression models. Okay, so equations to the data set. The null model is the basic model, and that assumes that nothing's had an effect on anything. So there's no effect of species, no effect of species interactions, no effect of irrigation. The predicted yield is exactly the same as the overall average, so that was 11.2 tonnes per hectare. Then you add a more complex model to it, and that's asking the question, well, is the yield related only to the species identity? Okay, so we fit some more terms to it there. The X1 represents the proportion of Caucasian clover in the mix, the X2 the proportion of white, the X3 the proportion of ryegrass. So you could use that simple model to estimate the yield of a pasture mixture based solely on the performance of those species by themselves. Now it gets a little bit more complex. This model asks the question, well, is there a species effect as well as 2 species interaction effects? So it's trying to address that additional increase in yield by adding some more terms to the model. And if you can't get your head around that, you should go this one. Okay, so then it gets a bit more complex, and here we've got the effect of irrigation coming into play. So essentially we can compare these 2 models using sequential sums and squares analysis, and I'll go through some of these model comparisons. So if we compare the results of the first model, the null model, no effect of anything, versus the second model to test the question, do species affect the yield of the mixtures? Okay, so you did the p-value of that is less than 0.05. So yes, there is evidence that the species are performing differently in their contribution to the total yield, and this is over the whole 5-year period. Okay, comparing the third model with the second model, ask the question of, is there an additional effect of pairwise interactions, so the interaction between 2 species? That is highly significant. So there's strong evidence to say that yes, if you grow a legume with a non-legume, we get a yield increase, and the performance of the mixture is the result of the species identity effects and also the pairwise interaction effects. If you compare the more complex model 4 with the last one, 3, that's asking the question, do we get an additional increase in yield by growing three species together, or three-way interactions, compared to two-way interactions? And no, okay? So there's no evidence to say that three species are interacting in such a way that it's actually giving us an increase in yield greater than what we'd expect from a two-species mixture, provided those two species are a legume, whether it's white clover or Caucasian clover, and ryegrass. Okay? Lastly, that last big model, you break it down, it's asking questions, well, how does irrigation affect the species identity? You put water on, that responds, all those three species responded in an increase in yield. That's what that is telling us. You put water on, that's also increasing those two ways, the two species interactions. So the additional benefit that we get from growing the legume with the non-legume, we get an increase in yield, and that increase in yield is greater when there's a higher amount of water. And there's no effect of irrigation on that three species interaction, which actually didn't occur anyway. Okay? So, what we know about Caucasian clover, and this has been going for quite some time now, particularly in Dick Lucas's career, and when I started to get onto the scene, now we've got some information about the interactions between plant species, including Caucasian clover, combined with other evidence to say that Caucasian clover gives us a high legume content, particularly in dryland conditions, but also irrigated situations. We've addressed the slow establishment issue. We've got information about nitrogen fixation, and evidence to say that Caucasian clover fixes about the same amount of N per kilo of dry matter as other legume species. It needs a specific rhizobia, so we need to nodulate it. We haven't really got around the seed production issue, but evidence is indicating that, well, if we stress the plant, we might, to encourage it to flower, that might give us a better yield in terms of seed production. Species contributions to pasture mixtures differ depending on those species characteristics. The yield of a pasture mixture is mainly driven by those species identity effects and the two-way interactions. No additional benefit we saw by including a third species. Simple mixtures are actually not too bad, provided it's a legume and a non-legume. And those effects seem to be consistent across the dryland irrigation scenarios that we imposed at Lincoln, and robust over time despite some very big changes in composition. Thanks everybody. Questions?
Thanks, Alistair. Yes, we do have a couple of minutes of questions.
You didn't see a lot of difference in the three species mix. That's the message, that it's just simple mixture is good. But I think that your weed content was quite different with the three species experiment, because the weeds were almost eliminated, and that's a benefit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, that three species mixture, even the white clover suppressed the Caucasian clover establishment. If you saw the contribution of the white clover in the three species mixture, it was always quite good. So the effect that white clover had on the Caucasian clover in the establishment phase, really Caucasian surviving plants didn't recover that much after that. So yes, you're quite right.
Well, Alistair, I think that gives us a message. If you want to establish Caucasian clover, don't put white with it. So in the first year, white is a weed in Caucasian.
We're essentially competing for the same resources, and that resource in the initial stage is light, and they've got the very, very similar canopy architecture, and white clover's getting its fair share of light and more, much better than Caucasian clover in the early stages, because it's able to develop that leaf canopy much faster.